Right. Another amazing week of AI. Today, I want to talk about Gemini 2.0 wins. Who saw that coming? Kind of did. There is a lot happening in AI, but I picked Gemini because I really think there's not enough attention being given to what Google is doing right now. Let's be honest, I'm guilty of it too. I talked about OpenAI's latest announcement last time around, and we have to give credit where credit is due. I mean, Google is sort of the progenitor of the space, but this 2.0 release is a big leap. 1.5 was pretty great, but 2.0 is mind blowing. Let's look at where we were last year in February of 2024 on lifearchitect.ai. I think this is really an interesting comparison to make as well, because he's very much focused on thinking about where we are from a human intelligence standpoint and where we are from an artificial intelligence standpoint. These are some important elements for us to consider because we want to make that comparison so we can understand what is the level of development, how far have we come, and what is the level of information that they are consuming and leveraging in the intelligence that they have. One of the interesting tidbits that's on this slide that I think is really interesting is the language count and books read. When we think about the volume of information these AI models are digesting and taking advantage of, the sheer quantity is really quite overwhelming. And to think about any system being able to work across 200 languages, I think it's really inconceivable. And as I was doing my research for the program today, I was also looking at some of the other programs that we're going to talk about, really showing an entirely new experience around language, being in a different place and being able to speak with them through the power of translation on a device is incredible. There's a lot that has already happened. I mean, this was Gemini 1 and Gemini 1.5. And I candidly, I don't know anyone that I can think of off the top of my head that said, wow, Gemini 1.5 is really the groundbreaking best model ever. Google has been behind in terms of that cutting edge capability. They're not getting the same level of attention that OpenAI has been. And I've paid attention a lot to OpenAI because they showed us it was possible. My personal preference for the last 18 months or so, Claude. I really like the way that Claude writes. I like the way that it generates the language. I like it more than what I've seen with OpenAI. There's not really anything that I've felt compelled to be really tied to Gemini, other than the fact that it's part of the Google ecosystem and I use it to parse my email. It is a helper to me in a number of ways, and I pay for it. It is a valuable resource to me. It lets me scale the amount of work that I can do, but it hasn't been majorly talked about. And, the thing is, Google has been the first to a number of areas. And what I honestly didn't realize is that Google was the first real deep research. Yeah, I made a mistake. This was an AI mistake of mine. Google released deep research in December, and I completely missed it. Didn't see it. Didn't know they had it. When I did the video 2 weeks ago, I talked about deep research and I talked about the release of OpenAI and their deep research and everything we've seen with the other model DeepSeek and how it was doing the chain of thought in print. Deep research got there first. I didn't notice until today. Mea culpa. I missed it. Look, 1.5 Pro with deep research, and I don't know how I missed it. I love these deep research ideas, and we continue to add them. Perplexity has one. It seems everybody is adding the deep research capability. It's now an open thing. It seems to be something that people really enjoy and like, and I think it's a valuable feature set. So that is definitely something to keep in mind. And look, not everybody has the subscription to Google's properties, and I did want to give them clear credit for what they have done. So, with that fix, Done. Let's move on and talk about exactly what's in Gemini 2. There's several models. So we have Gemini 2.0 Flash, Flash Lite Preview, Gemini 2.0 Pro, Gemini 2.0 Flash Thinking Experimental, and Gemini 2.0 Pro Experimental. Let's unpack this because there are unique features you need to be aware of. And they each have their own value. One of the things that's going to be a big takeaway, what exactly is important here and what do you need to pay attention to? The first point is 2.0 Flash is generally available, but you have to use it in a couple of very specific ways. The best way is Google AI Studio or Vertex AI because you can directly consume it. And the number one unique feature here is 2 million token context. That is a huge context window. I understand from looking at people's results that it's not perfect, but 2 million is an outrageous number, quite honestly. Multimodal is an important thing. There's lots of control over the text to speech and the agentic capabilities, which we're also going to come back to this a little bit later as well. It is very much focused toward those use cases. But honestly, I really think the most important element here is the 30% cheaper for large context. When you are applying this to an agentic set of use cases, there's a lot more calls that have to be made. That cost differential is really going to mean a lot to the people that are using this capability. So we're definitely going to come back and talk more about Gemini 2.0 Flash later and show you how to use this from an agentic standpoint. We're going to keep going on how we can use this to our advantage. Gemini 2.0 Flash is the game changer in more than one way. Gemini 2.0 Flash is the top agent on the leaderboard. There is this project space on Hugging Face, Galileo AI Agent Leaderboard. They are rating various models. Number one on the list, Gemini Flash 2.0. The real kicker here is look at the cost differential between Gemini 2.0 Flash and GPT 4.0, the other agentic model for agent tasks. That is a huge delta. And this is why it matters so much because number one, it is getting a very, very high appraisal. The scores are the highest and it is the cheapest. I think that's the real game changer here is that Google delivered with Gemini 2.0 Flash a very high score from an impression standpoint and low cost. The absolute cheapest also belongs to Google, which they should be very proud of. The fact that they're delivering this, and some of this has to do with their TPU architecture. They're not having to pay the NVIDIA tax right now, and that might have something to do with the rate that they are charging. The other notable things that you should observe here is that it is not simply an open AI and Google show, though the first 6 places are exclusive to either open AI or Google. I want to give some good credit here to Mistral. While focused on Google today, Mistral released their mobile app recently. So you can interact directly with Mistral on the iPhone. That's the platform that I'm using. They're trying to make great strides. Some say Europe has no good AI. I beg to differ. Mistral is doing some very innovative things, and I think they deserve some kudos for continuing to make the list. They're beating DeepSeek, and that's the one that everybody's been talking about lately. So wanted to call that out. Pretty critical distinction there, not to leave them behind. But the other couple of models that are on here, I think, are an important thing for us to talk about as well. Google has some new models that are experimental that they're giving us access to early. They're not saying these are complete, that they're fully baked, but they're giving us access to them anyway because there are some specific capabilities that they have. So for Gemini 2.0 Pro, still classified as experimental, it is really built for that high coding experience. They are really trying to drive advanced code development and explainability. There's been a lot of talk about what Google has been doing with coding, And Gemini 2.0 Pro is a part of that discussion. They have increasingly used AI to do their internal development. So they are really putting their money into being able to accelerate what they can build. And I think that's a really great investment for Google. There was a conversation on the All In podcast a week or two ago. This was the absolute best capital allocation Google can make, investing in AI to accelerate their development across the board. So I think we're going to see more in that coding space. I would not be completely surprised if Google actually pulls ahead in the way that they're leveraging coding with the models. I think those two things go together really well. And they have so far really been firing on all cylinders lately. I think they've figured out some of their organizational things to start applying this in new ways. They're not at the absolute cusp, but I think they have the velocity to pull ahead if they keep going, especially if there are some challenges any of the other major organizations have across Microsoft, Anthropic, and OpenAI. There's a lot of infrastructure at play, and Google has a unique advantage with their TPUs. So, what about the other models? Gemini 2.0 Flash Thinking Experimental. That is the DeepSeek model. If I look at the video of the Google Deep Research, I actually kind of think that Google really showed a thinking model before everybody else did in greater detail. DeepSeek was the first one I picked up on, but my miss of the deep research capability when they released it in December was a big miss on my part. I think Google deserves more credit. The last one is the Gemini 2 Pro experimental, where that's not released. That is entirely behind the scenes that we know they're working on further developing it. So there's more to come from what they are working on. So let's talk about the things we can do with these models. Look, OpenAI is doing amazing things. DeepSeek has done cool things, but honestly, both are irrelevant to multimodal. If you look at what O3 did, it's not there. This is the best multimodal model that you can get access to, and anybody can get to it. That's the really amazing part. They're not holding back. It does images, text, audio, voices, multiple accents and languages. You can access and use Gemini 2.0 models to do amazing things. And we're going to go into detail as we get into the discussion tonight. The agentic AI enablement. I mean, I would characterize the Gemini 2.0 release as the agentic AI release for Google, because not only does it have the capability to understand more than the text, but it's also able to work in multiple different modalities and in different functions. Now they are definitely optimizing 2.0 some of the models for coding and complex instructions. The key is the work they've done with Gemini 2 focused on enabling that agentic journey. They are finding ways to inject this and leverage existing Google properties like Google Search and Google Maps, making that journey easy. And it is the ability to integrate streaming data into the generative AI outputs. So not only can you take in and consume audio and video, but also you're able to connect to those things in getting to the outputs. I haven't had a chance to play with this yet, but this is very interesting. A multimodal live API. Not seen anything like that anywhere else. So that is definitely curious. And then as we're talking about where Flash deserves the most attention from us now, because it's very fast. It's also a low cost and it's also performing really well. So, given the speed and the low cost and capability, it is not to be missed. Get your hands on this. It's twice as fast as the previous version. They're trying a new Flash Lite version. And this is particularly interesting because I think this Flash Lite model is definitely headed for Android devices. I think their plans are to further enable devices. I really do believe 2025 is the year of on-device models. There's a lot of advantages to working in the cloud, but there's also a lot of challenges. And being able to run on a single device you take with you everywhere, I think is where this is ultimately going to go. But what's amazing about even the flashlight is that even that runs at an equivalent of 1.5. We're getting smaller and faster with the version upgrades. Very important distinction. So let's keep going. What is Google going to do with this? I think there's going to be a product impact. They've already swapped models for Google search. I have not really paid attention to this very closely. We had all of that trouble last year with the search. It was not a good story. I think they've learned their lesson. They made that AI mistake and understand how important it is to put the right model. They're upgrading that search capability quickly. You're also able to access the Gemini 2 model across Google Workspace. So if you're using Docs, Slides, Sheets, and Meet, all of those products are benefiting from these models. As I mentioned, the Android devices, I think mid-year, summer's going to be a fun time. If you are looking at a device refresh, I might hold off. I'm not up on Google's refresh schedule, so I don't know when the next one is coming out, but I think we're going to see a big change. Apple tried it and messed up. They did a terrible job. I'm not sure how they're going to recover from that, but I understand they're working on it, and Google's going to give their answer, and I think it's going to be a lot better. And then the one that the bullet point here that has to be captured is Google AI Studio and Vertex AI. Google is really working hard to make the AI capabilities accessible to developers, to organizations, and this is the way they're doing it. And once again, they are really putting investments into making that possible because we need to talk about pricing. So, couple of important details here. This is all priced per 1 million input tokens, and at 15 cents per million input tokens is just unbelievable. It gets even cheaper with the batch API. They do have limits on what you can execute here. They are not just going to open the door to everything. These prices are really low in terms of the API consumption and your use of them. What's interesting is now we have this modality-based pricing where it is actually pricing per image, per text, per video, per audio. So they all have their own distinctive pricing. And the metering is interesting because, look, we've got the input video, but the other announcement that just happened a few minutes ago is the VO2 model that has been announced by Google now is accessible by API. Now, Google has not done it as a first-class citizen, so I expect anytime now you'll see it available on their platform as well. What's interesting is it's becoming more widely available. We have to figure out how these things are going to be priced. I showed OpenAI Sora. They're doing it by tokens. You get a certain amount of tokens to pay for. It's very expensive. I think we're going to see some continued disruption, honestly, by Google, what they're putting out there and making available. I mean, honestly, this is like Bitcoin. Like the price is a small amount per second times 60 to get to a minute, but that price astounds me. I am enthused by what they're putting here. Now, we have to talk about Google AI Studio. In Google AI Studio, you can use the models and it is completely free. Go into Google AI Studio by going to aistudio.google.com. You actually have the opportunity to use the model completely free. Now, there are limitations and guardrails on how much you can run. There's a rate throttle involved, but really, the fact that you're able to use this completely free is astounding to me. We're going to take full advantage because there's some good things we can do with this. They also have great tooling inside the Google AI Studio. They link you to all the API documentation. You can turn on stored prompts. This is from a project I did months ago, but I turned on the history and it's able to keep it in the prompt library. So if you're not sure where to start with prompts, I mean, there's great stuff in here to get you started. They have starter apps. So again, they have an entire app that you can work with. So they are, again, connecting to their existing properties and overlaying with maps. So you can just come in here and play around with it. Like, take me to a metropolitan area, show me a really interesting large city. It filled into the prompt and it took us to Armenia, a place I've not looked at. And you can manipulate it like regular maps. Maybe there's some overlay or some search opportunity there. They give you the starting point for that, which I think is really, really fantastic. They also have this really great prompt building capability. So again, if you are stuck on, I don't know what to build, I don't know how to write prompts, this is a help to you. They give you what you need. I mean, this is like a developer paradise here. So if you are curious at all about developing AI tools or widgets, this is a good place to take advantage of what's possible. We'll come back to this because we're going to have to talk about getting the API key. This is a major deal, not to be missed. We'll come back to that. The pricing of Gemini is astounding. Here's other things we need to cover. I mentioned the TPU advantage Google has. Oh, we got a question here before I move on. Let me go back to the pricing. We got Linsquo. What will explain this input token business? That's a very good question. Let me jump back and talk to that because token pricing can be confusing. When we talk about the 1 million input tokens, we have to first understand what a token is. And it's not precisely a word. A lot of people use words as an analog for tokens, but that's not correct. There's a paper that talks about it. I can put in the links another document that really explains, and there's a website that, well, actually you can type it in and it will parse out the tokens. So you get a better feel of what the tokens are. But basically that gets you enough tokens that you can take your average book that you and I would read, and it definitely is going to fit into that 1 million tokens. Imagine it costs you 15 cents to put in every page of Lord of the Rings. Ask any questions. Now, that's covering the input and the output. You're going to pay 15 cents to load up Lord of the Rings, and then you're going to pay 60 cents if it prints out Lord of the Rings. Now, the truth is, almost always the amount of output is going to be less than the amount of input, particularly because one of the major use cases is retrieval augmented generation, where you want a summary or a short answer. You want something succinct. You don't want it to write a novel. You don't want it to write a new book. That is a use case for AI. There is a time and a place for that. In most scenarios, you're talking about the amount of input tokens. Now, this does not take into consideration caching of those input tokens, which is also possible. It is possible actually to load up those details and have it cache it so that you are not paying for that input token every single time. If you want to consistently interrogate the Lord of the Rings, you could cache those tokens and then you don't have quite so much to pay because that's already loaded into the model. So there is a reduction in price for that as well. Okay, so let's get back to where I was talking about the hardware release. What I noticed in the documents with the release of Gemini, they talked about this hardware release. They are on their 6th generation GPU, which I think is interesting. Inside of this was this quote: Gemini 2.0 is built on custom hardware like Trillium. They're already working on version 7, probably 8 and 9, if we're honest. It is the 6th generation TPU. It's the real Google special sauce. Every bit of work that they have done on Gemini 2 is based from their TPU. And now, the other announcement here is that Trillium is generally available. So what does that mean? You now have the possibility to use those latest and greatest TPUs for your own AI project. Now, that may not be so important to this audience, but I do think that this is something to keep an eye on because we have some very well-known and familiar languages like PyTorch and TensorFlow are immediately compatible with TPUs. There is tremendous power behind the scenes. They are building like crazy. When Elon's group did his thing with Grok and how many GPUs they deployed, Jensen got all excited and said, "Oh, nobody's deployed this as fast as they have." But I don't think we have a really good comparison for the TPU construct that Google is using or how fast they're rolling this out. I haven't seen any numbers, but you see here that a very well-known AI lab, AI 21, is using TPUs. And they are continuing to develop this. Google has some very sharp people working on hardware. So I do think there is some substantial runway ahead of Google for them to continue to turn this into a valuable service. I think they have an early start on everybody else trying to build hardware. Your workload for AI might actually belong on Google Cloud. It might be the best place for that to belong. You know, I think that's worth looking into. And especially as you get a chance to play with Gemini, you'll see they've done a great job optimizing for speed and cost. And the hardware is 100% the reason why they are able to do that. Now, let's talk about the agents because this is the agentic release. Everybody's talking about agents. I spend a lot of time in my day job understanding, working with, experimenting, teaching, learning about agents. It is the thing everybody cares about. We all want to get rid of the work that we don't like doing. And Google says this is our new AI model for the agentic era. What is Google doing with it that is agentic? They have three major projects. These are not public. You can sign up to participate with Google. I dropped my Gmail address in there to them. You never know, right? I mean, you get a chance to get in early and test these things out. The forms were released in December, and because I'm late to the Gemini party here, I'm at the end of the list. But the forms are still open. If interested, sign up for the program. I signed up for both Astra and Mariner, and I'm particularly interested in Mariner. And what's interesting about Mariner is that they basically have taken and they've created a Chrome extension, Gemini, into the window. So it is able to control the browser with this sort of side panel in Chrome. It gives you the typical interface to the large language model. You give it instructions, and it is able to control the companion window. And this is the video of the project management team actually demoing the product, looking at what's possible. This assignment here that they're working on actually is they're taking a couple of companies and they're trying to find contact information. If you're in the sales business, trying to understand who to contact is work that has to be done. And that information is out there for sales folks to discover. You can now have the agent do that work for you. There's multiple platforms that can do this. We do not have access to Project Mariner. It is still a hidden project. How are we going to use Gemini? I have great news. And what's great about this browser input kind of paradigm that we're in the middle of, leveraging the browser experience, humanoid robots, because we all want to use this stuff. Why are humanoid robots a thing? The answer is simple. Everything is designed for a human-sized interface. If you want the robot to be able to do the things that humans do, you make a robot that's shaped like a human. And so what do we do with using computers? The first app I open is a browser. Many times it's the last app that gets closed because our existence is based around browser use. This browser use project is an open source capability. It is a project on GitHub. So browser use, and it's getting a lot of attention, tons of contributors. They're doing just tons and tons of building here that lets you use AI with your browser. And what's really great about this is that it takes a lot of the work and it makes it easy. It's very consumable. It uses image recognition to identify the various areas in the interface. This is reminiscent of my CSS development days. I still have a web browser extension that I use in Google Chrome called the developer toolbar because as a website developer, I mean, being able to understand the layers, the presentation layers, and what you could move around in building a website. Any website you can get to, you can use this capability. What's cool here is that with the use of Pinocchio, I didn't have to do any work. All I had to do was click my button to start up Pinocchio after I got it installed. This is a prepackaged, ready to go Pinocchio option. Once I pull up Pinocchio, you go to the package offerings and browser use web UI is right there. It is easy to access. You just go to discover and it's right here in the discovery and it's at the top of the list and you click a couple of buttons and you're off and running. Super simple to get going. It has a web interface. All I have to do is click to open the web UI. Once we get it going, we can configure everything in the browser session. Because it's a web UI, I can zoom into it. That's very handy for YouTube. But you can enable and disable the vision model here, turn it off and decide not to use it. You can take inputs and outputs from a page and do things with text without vision. I see the utility in having the vision capability. But then there's the LLM configuration. Every model option in the universe is already in here. So all you got to do is go in here and pick the one you want to use. If you installed Olama after looking at the web UI for the models, right? You could just go in here and you tell it what model you want to use and you're off and going. It's interfacing with Olama running in the background. The one to look at here is Google Gemini 2.0. We have a space to drop our API key. So check this out. If I go and I pick up Google AI Studio, and yes, you have to go get an ID, but come on, honestly, who doesn't have a Google account these days? Just go create a new one. This is a no-brainer because you go and click get API key, and it spits out a key, and then you can take that key, drop it in the interface, and you're off and running. Let me just hide the screen while I get another fresh API key by clicking the API button. I've got to choose a project. I am using Google Cloud for experimentation. They do have some good things. I like the way that their setup works. I'm also doing the same with OpenAI and Microsoft. So there's nothing special about that. I'm an equal opportunity exploiter of cloud providers. All I'm doing is dropping this in. I've got my API key and putting it in. Once configured, I can go to the next. I'm just going to leave this. We're going to use the browser that opens, and I'm even going to use their demo. And we're going to run it. We're going to watch it. This could be fun. While we're watching, I see we got more questions coming in. My big worry about browser agents, it will devastate the internet. That's a very good point. This is actually opening Chromium. It's in its own browser session to use the internet. We do have a bot problem already. Imagine the proliferation of bots with this capability. It's not a risk-free operation. You can imagine, well, I want to pay all my bills, right? You could automate that with this, but consider the bad things that can happen. This is not a risk-free endeavor. Using agents is not a mistake-free endeavor. And I think the concept of AI mistakes It's just not perfect and non-deterministic. So how much can you rely on it? A lot of that's on the foundation model builders, making it reliable, able to do vision recognition and understand what it's seeing. But one of the interesting things you already see happening here is I asked it to go look for OpenAI and go to the first link and then find the API documentation. It had a problem, but wound up searching for the API documentation. The model understood what I wanted and acted differently. This is definitely an area that is worthy of experimentation. I definitely think this is worth your time. If there is one model that you play with, it is Gemini 2.0 Flash. And with the Google AI Studio, you don't even have to enter a credit card. There are limitations. You can absolutely use it all up. So be aware, right, that that could happen. But I definitely think this is worth your time and you should go check it out. It's time to make some AI mistakes with AI agents because this tech is so new. Don't let anybody tell you they've perfected it. None of this is foolproof. You probably don't want to set this loose on your regular computer. There is real risk here. So, if you have any ability to set up a virtual machine or put this on a separate computer just to keep things separated, I definitely think that is a good idea. There's going to be mistakes, but we're going to learn a lot from experimenting with this. And everybody's experimenting with it, right? Google's got their own project. OpenAI wants you to pay $200 to use theirs. We've seen Claude controlling a computer, so they've got an implementation. This was just simple to deploy and start working with, thanks to Pinocchio. I'm already thinking about all of the ways that I can use this in my own life to get mundane things done I don't want to do. The other piece of this is just run some experiments, try things out, get your hands dirty, spend 5 minutes on decide it's not a thing for you. Hey, it didn't cost you anything and you learned what it takes. You may learn this isn't something I want to do. I just want to buy some software that's important to know. Know your limitations, or maybe you discover there's a lot of companies looking for tech talent. You show up and say, I know how to build AI agents. If you don't have a job and you show up talking about how you built an AI agent, that's going to play in your favor. I want to help you get ahead. Let's go make some AI mistakes and make the world better. See you next time. Have a great week.